So our next lesson or topic is all about universalizability. To figure out how the faculty of reason can be the cause of an autonomous action, we need to learn a method or a specific procedure that will demonstrate autonomy of the will. But before explaining this procedure, it will be helpful to first make a distinction about kinds of moral theories, namely the substantive and formal moral theories. A substantive moral theory immediately promulgates the specific actions that comprise that theory. When we say promulgates, like being explained or to show to the people or to everybody the specific actions. As such, it identifies the particular duties in a straightforward manner that the adherents of the theory must follow. Okay, straightforward. An example of this one is the set of 10 commandments of the Judeo-Christian tradition. Okay, that is an ambiguous example of a substantive moral theory. The specific laws are articulated mostly in the form of a straightforward moral command, like honor your father and mother, you shall not kill, and so forth. Again, if it's substantive, okay, it is being articulated in a straightforward manner, like the rules are in there where all of us must follow. In contrast, a formal moral theory does not supply the rules or commands straight away. Okay, it does not tell you what you may do or may not do. Instead, a formal moral theory provides us the form or framework of the moral theory. To provide the form of a moral theory is to supply a procedure and the criteria for determining on one's own the rules and moral commands. Metaphorically, we can use this example of a cookbook. Okay? In a cookbook, we are given instructions or procedures about cooking a certain dish. But we are not given the actual food themselves, which would be substantive. Okay, did you get it? So in a cookbook, we are given instructions, but we are not given the actual food themselves. If we are given the actual food themselves, it can be substantive. But because it's not, then it can be a formal. In following a recipe like a sinigang, if you follow all the steps, okay, or if you do not wish to follow all the steps and if you wanted to have a slight variation to the ingredients and sequence of the steps, then it can be a formal theory. Okay? We can remain at sinigang, but we have a slight variation on the ingredients and procedure of cooking the dish. To be exact, a formal moral theory will not give us a list of rules or commands. Instead, it will give us a set of instructions on how to make a list of duties or moral commands. Kant endorses this formal kind of moral theory. The Gandelgang zur Metaphysik der Sitten, which he wrote in 1785, embodies a formal theory in what he calls the categorical imperative, which provides a procedural way of identifying the rightness or wrongness of an action. Kant articulates the categorical imperative this way: act only according to such maxim by which you can act at once, will that it become a universal law. So when we say maxim, okay, those are the action, or every action has a preceding reason behind it. Okay, there are 4 key elements in this formulation of the categorical imperative, namely action, maxim, will, and universal law. Kant states that we must formulate an action as a maxim, which he defines as a subjective principle of action. Maxim consists of a rule that we live by in our day-to-day lives, but it does not have the status of law or a moral command that binds us to act in a certain way. Okay, maxim. Okay, it is like a formal theory that you don't need to act, or there is no specific rule being provided by someone else or somebody there. Okay, it is in our day-to-day basis, and it depends on our reasons or how we see the consequences. Maxims are akin to the standard operating procedures or SOPs in our lives. We act according to a variety of maxims even if we are not aware of them. Okay, like we are not aware, like for example, we tell our friends that when the exam week begins, I go to mass so that I will be blessed with good luck. Okay, and you haven't noticed that you have the maxim. Like whenever you meet your crush, you wear a braid in your hair so that he will notice you. Okay, so you are just doing all those stuffs and things without getting in mind that you are doing that because of your maxims. This is why Kant calls a maxim a subjective principle of action. We have many maxims in our daily lives and we live according to them. Okay, it is subjective principle of action because a maxim is a principle of action or volition that depends on the agent's desires and understanding of his or her circumstances. That is why it is called subjective. The desires can be corrupted and the understanding can be faulty.
Good day, ma'am. I am Romelyn Ricafrente, and I am going to continue the topic Universalizability. In the formulation of the categorical imperative, Kant calls our attention to the kind of maxims that we live by. So, in categorical imperative, we need to understand our subjective principle of action. And Kant called this idea of subjectivity as maxims. Maxims consist of our rules that we live by in our day-to-day lives. It is the subjective principle of our actions. In this formulation, Kant is telling us to conceive of the maxim as if it obligated to everyone to comply. This mental act of imagining a universalized maxim does not mean we picture a world in which everyone actually follow the maxim. Instead, we merely imagine the maxim as a law that everyone ought to follow. Just like, for example, during the pandemic, we are required to follow the COVID-19 health protocols. Since our health is the main concern, we are required to wear a face mask, use alcohols, and do the physical distancing. And since it is practiced by many, or it was practiced by many and followed by many, we are ought to follow the same thing. That is why we call this as universal law. Why is everyone were obligated to follow that maxim? Here is a clear example. In Groundwork Towards the Metaphysics of Morals, Kant takes up the issue of making false promises. He narrates the predicament of a man who needs money but has no immediate access to obtain it except by borrowing it from a friend. This man knows that he will not be able to pay the money back, but if he says he cannot return the money, then no money will be lent to him. Hence, the predicament is simply about him borrowing money while knowing that he cannot pay it back. This is a specific act under the general category of acts called false promising. Kant says that the man would be like to make such a promise, but he stops and asks himself if what he is about to do is right or wrong. Is it really wrong to borrow money without intending to pay it back? If we were to formulate this act as a maxim, it would go this way. When I am in need of money, I shall borrow it, even when I know I cannot pay it back. Now, there are possibilities in this hypothetical world where people are obligated to borrow money without intending to pay. The maxim can either make sense or not make sense as universal law. By making sense, we refer to the logical plausibility of the universalized maxim. The opposite of logical plausibility is self-contradiction or logical impossibility. So, there are two ways to understand universal law according to Kant: consistent with self and contradict itself. What does this mean by these two? For example, you're fond of taking stolen pictures of your friend, but to her, it's annoying. Another example is that during the pageant of Miss Universality 2022, I have this candidate whom I'm very fond of because she has shown her capabilities in which I think she deserves to be crowned. But to my disappointment, she did not. The point is, for me, that person deserves the title as Miss Universality 2022. However, to others, she's not deserving to have that crown. So, in universal law, what's right to you could be wrong to others, and what's right to others could be wrong to you. This is why Kant claims that the universalized maxim could never be valid as a universal law of nature and be consistent itself, but must necessarily contradict itself. So, to make this topic short, universal law means if I do this action, everyone should be follow. For example, during the pandemic, we embraced online and modular classes as new ways of learning. naging consistent siya sa aton kaugalingon kay because we don't have any other choice. However, para sa iban, hindi siya manami kay tungod, mabudlay ang signal and everything. Kumbaga, waay nandagin embrace ang ginatawag nga universal law. That would be all, ma'am. Thank you.